Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll configure this network. So the network itself has a firewall, in this case it's pfSense, and has three networks that it connects to. This network is defined as public, this one is private, and this one is the DMZ. The public network is configured through DHCP, so we don't have to add the IP addresses to this network. The other networks will be configured with static IP addresses. These two networks are defined as 10.10.something.0 and 10.10.11.10.10.y.0. So you'll be allocated either an X or a Y to be able to define your network. So in this case, I'll just use 10.10.10.0 and 10.10.11.0 for this network. Then we'll place the hosts at a certain IP address. Because we're using the 24 subnet, then the first three fields identify the network and the last part identifies the host. So I'll place it at 10.10.10.7 and I'll place the Windows server at 10.10.11.7. We need to configure the gateways to allow them to be able to get out and connect to the internet. So we'll configure this as 10.10.10.254 and set this machine up so that it has a default gateway of this port. Same again over here. The default gateway for this machine is this IP address. We also need to enable a DNS on each of the machines, and luckily we're running a DNS service over here on this gateway. So the DNS is set up on these machines to have this IP address as the DNS service. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll configure our network. Okay, so just click here and open this up, and we should get to production, the module name, and then your matriculation number. What you should find is that there are a number of virtual machines. So we have our two firewalls, pfSense and Viata. We have our private Ubuntu, the DMZ Windows 7, the DMZ Kali, and also the public Kali there. This will allow us to be able to set up most of our labs. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and we'll get them powered on, and we'll have a look at setting the whole network up. So I'll power on pfSense, and I'll power on the public Kali so we can actually see what the IP address is there. We'll power on Ubuntu and Windows 7. Okay, so we'll initially just have a little look at the Kali machine just to see what the IP address is there. We don't have to change anything here. This is just our test machine. So we'll get logged in and have a look. Okay, so we can run ifconfig, or we can run IP address show. Okay, and what we should see is that the Ethernet adapter name is ETH0, and it has an IP address which has been allocated to it of 10.221.2.254.248 with a /22 subnet. What we should find is that the default gateway is here. Okay, so that's working, and now what we'll see if we've got connectivity with the internet, and we do. We'll see if we can get DNS connectivity, and we have. Okay, so everything is working here, but none of the other hosts will be working because they need to be connected through the firewall. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll just open up each of the machines. So there is our Ubuntu machine, and again we can run ifconfig, IP address show. Okay, so what we should see is that actually one of our interfaces is down. That's our main Ethernet interface, ENS32. So what we'll do is we'll just put that one in an up state. IP link set ENS32 up. That's fine. Okay, so we've got that interface there. We'll just get our Windows machine started up and we should be good to go. Okay, so then over here we use ipconfig and there shouldn't be anything really set up there. We won't have any connectivity at all from any of our hosts. So what we must do now is to configure our firewall. And with our firewall, we only have to configure one port because we can connect into the firewall through our Ubuntu machine. So we'll just do that. It's got firewall, no VLANs. The local interface name is LE0 for WAN, LE1 for private, and LE2 for the DMZ. That's fine. It's just getting set up now. So what we'll find is that once we've got connectivity from Ubuntu to the default gateway, then we'll be able to connect to the internet and everything should run. But the Windows machine connects to the DMZ and all the ports will be closed on that interface. Okay, so it's just starting up. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'm going to configure the IP address on the LAN, and I want this to be 10.10.10.254. And we're using the /24 subnet mask, no DHCP, and we want to be able to configure the firewall from the HTTP service on the LAN, so that's yes. Okay, so we now have an address that we can connect into the firewall on, 10.10.10.254. So we need to go ahead and we need to now configure our Ubuntu machine. Okay, so we'll give it an IP address. Add 10.10.10.7/24, and the device is ENS32. Oops, just forgot the slash there. That's fine. So now we'll try and ping the interface just to see if it's alive. And it is, and then we'll ping the default gateway, and that's alive. But now if we try to connect to the internet, then we won't be able to reach it because the Ubuntu doesn't know where to send the packets that aren't destined for the local network. It can connect to the default gateway, but not to anything else. So for that, we need to set up its default route where it sends data packets to, if it's not for the local network. So it's IP route add default via 10.10.10.254 and through that. So it's going to set up the routing table as a default route to there. So now, hopefully, when we ping, we have connectivity to the internet. But watch what happens when I try to ping google.com. It doesn't work. And when I do NS lookup, which resolve the domain name to the IP address, again, nothing will work. And the reason for that is that we need to set up the DNS IP address. So we'll do that. Run sudo nano etc resolve.conf, and we'll just change the name server to 10.221.3.254. That's the main gateway into our network. Now, magically, that still works. Now, we try it, and that works. Okay, so our DNS is working now. We should be able to do NS lookup, google.com, and it works perfectly. Okay, we should also be able to get connectivity to the internet through Google, because our DNS is working and our connectivity is working there too. Okay, so that's working fine. So what we'll do is we'll now connect into the firewall and configure the other port that connects to the Windows machine. Okay, so let's just make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so we'll go to our interfaces. For that, we'll enable the DMZ. We can call it another name if we want. And we'll set it up with a static IPv4 address. And that's going to be 10.10.11.254. And it needs to be set up with a 24 subnet mask. Don't take the default of 32 or it won't be able to connect to anything. Okay, so that's now our firewall interface set up. We should be able to go back here, and you should see that there has DMZ and the new IP address set. Everything looks fine there. Okay, so now that that's set, we will find that although we now need to set up our IP address on our Windows machine. So there, then we'll set that up. There. And it's 10.10.11.7.255.255.255.0, and the default gateway is 10.10.11.254. Now for the DNS, that has to be our main gateway there. We would normally set up another DNS, but that's the only one that will work. And unfortunately nothing will connect just now. We can just accept this one, but won't actually do that much. So if we have a look, then it's set up and we should be able to ping our own address. That's fine, but we can't ping the default gateway. And the reason for that is that the firewall is blocking all the traffic on that interface. So we now need to go to our firewall rules, and you can see that on the LAN there is a default rule that allows all traffic out. That's why we were able to connect to the internet so easily. But in the DMZ there's nothing, and a firewall won't allow anything unless there's a rule there to allow it. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll enable ICMP first for the protocol, and that will allow us to just basically debug or use ICMP. Okay, so from anywhere to anywhere else, we can lock it down to set networks, but we'll just let it be enabled. Okay, so now magically we can ping, and we should be able to ping Google because we will now have connectivity through the firewall to Google. But now if I try to ping google.com, this won't work because the DNS service will be blocked by the firewall. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll add in port 53 for UDP and TCP traffic. It's usually UDP, but we'll allow TCP too on port 53. And we go from port 53 to port 53 for DNS, so we'll enable that. And now what should happen is that works now. So our DNS is working. We should be able to do that, and that's fine. But what we won't be able to do now, even though that's all working, is that we won't be able to browse google.com. For that, we need to now add the port 443, TCP 443 as a destination. So let's find it. There's 443, that's the HTTPS port, from any port to HTTPS. So we'll just add that. And while we're here, we may as well add port 80, just in case we've got any HTTP traffic. So TCP, and we want to do port 80 there. Save. That's fine. Okay, so now we should be able to connect to Google, and we can. Okay, so we can actually now see that we have full connectivity of our network from both Ubuntu and also Windows. So now that we've got it all set up, let's now try to ping. So that's pinging ourselves, that pings the default gateway, that pings the Windows network gateway, and that pings the host, the Windows host. So you can see that's all working. Now we'll go to the Windows machine and do the same, because that's all opened up, hopefully. So here we are, just move that away. So we'll ping ourselves, ping the default gateway, ping the other gateway, and ping the Ubuntu machine, and that's working there too. We should also be able to ping the Kali machine, which is on the public network. Now what we'll do is we'll run nmap. That's a typical thing that we run. All the ports are open on the firewall, so we should be able to ping our Windows machine to see what services are running here. And we can see that one of the services that are running is port 80 HTTP. So hopefully if we open up our browser and we go to 10.10.11.7, that's the Windows machine, then we can see there's the IIS Windows server running. And then when we go over here, we won't be able to see all the services that are running because many of the ports are blocked. But hopefully we'll be able to see that the Ubuntu machine is running a web server. So we can see here, we can see HTTP. So we'll try to connect into the HTTP, and then 10.10.10.7, and then we can see that's the Ubuntu server running over there. Okay, if we want to debug a little bit more, we can drop into the shell here, and we can ping each of the ports, each of the hosts. That's working. That's working fine, and we can actually even ping the default gateway to see if that's alive. Okay, just exit and it takes us back to there. Okay, so that's been an overview of how to set up your network with pfSense.